They excluded me from the family business. But now I own the building. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday morning at 9:47 a.m. I know the exact time because I was sitting in my car across the street from Rossetti's family restaurant, watching my brother Tony unlock the front door like he'd done every morning for the past 8 months, ever since Dad handed him and Vincent the keys and told me I could find work elsewhere. Through the restaurant's front window, I could see Tony's face change as he read the letter. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again like a fish gasping for air. He called out something in rapid Italian, probably cursing, and Vincent came running from the kitchen, still wearing his apron with the marinara stain that had been there since last week. The letter was simple and professional: notice of change in property ownership. Effective immediately, your lease agreement will be managed by MC Property Holdings, LLC. Please direct all future correspondence to. And then my business address. What they didn't know, what nobody in my family knew, was that MC Property Holdings was me. Marcus Caruso. The son who wasn't management material. The brother who didn't understand the restaurant business despite working every position from busboy to head cook over 12 years. The family member who was good enough to pull 60-hour weeks but not good enough to own a single share of the place I'd bled for. I watched Vincent grab the letter from Tony's hands, his face turning the same shade of red as our grandmother's Sunday gravy. They were probably wondering who MC Property Holdings was, running through every possible scenario except the right one. Because in their minds, I was just Marcus, the kid brother who couldn't even afford his own apartment and had been living above the restaurant until they kicked me out along with everything else. They had no idea I'd been planning this for 3 years. It started the day Dad announced his retirement. I was 29 then, standing in that same kitchen, flour under my fingernails from making fresh pasta since 5 a.m. I'd assumed, stupidly, apparently, that 12 years of dedication meant something. That staying late every night, covering shifts when Tony was hungover, creating the carbonara recipe that became our signature dish, all of it would earn me a seat at the table. Instead, Dad looked right through me and handed Tony the manager keys. You and Vincent will split ownership 60-40, he said, like I wasn't even there. Marcus, you can stay on as kitchen staff if you want, but the boys will handle the business side. Kitchen staff. After 12 years, I was still just staff. That night, I opened my laptop and started researching. The building that housed Rossetti's was owned by Goldberg Properties, an aging landlord who'd been trying to sell for months. The asking price was $340,000, exactly $90,000 more than I had in savings from years of barely spending a dime while living rent-free upstairs. It took me 8 months to secure the business loan. 8 months of meeting with banks, preparing financial statements, and proving I could afford the mortgage payments on a property manager's salary, the day job I'd taken after my brothers made it clear I wasn't welcome in the family business anymore. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using the money I'd saved by being excluded from profit sharing to buy the very foundation their profits depended on. Now, watching them panic over that letter, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: power. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent at 11:23 a.m. Marcus, call me. Emergency at the restaurant. I let it ring when he called 30 seconds later. Then again at 11:26. By the third missed call, I was almost enjoying myself. For once, they needed me more than I needed them. The fourth call came from Tony. I answered on the fifth ring. Marcus, thank God. We got this crazy letter today about the building being sold. Do you know anything about new owners? You still have connections with property management, right? I'd forgotten I'd told them my new job was in property management, technically true, since I managed my own property now. What kind of letter? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Some company called MC Property Holdings bought the building from Goldberg. Never heard of them. We're freaking out here because our lease is up for renewal next month and we don't know if these new people are gonna jack up the rent or what. Next month. February 15th, to be exact. I'd memorized every date in their lease agreement when I'd reviewed the building's financials. Their current rent was $4,200 a month, criminally low for a prime location on Hanover Street in the North End. Market rate was closer to $7,500. Have you tried calling this MC Property Holdings? I suggested. Vincent's been trying all morning. Goes straight to voicemail. We need to set up a meeting ASAP. This business can't survive if some corporate vulture decides to price us out. Tony's voice cracked slightly. Good. Let him sweat. After hanging up, I sat in my cramped Somerville apartment, the one bedroom I'd moved into after they kicked me out, and stared at the framed photo on my desk. It was from the restaurant's 15th anniversary party, back when I still believed I had a future there. Dad's arm around all 3 of his sons, Vincent holding the anniversary cake I'd baked from scratch, Tony raising a glass of wine to toast the family business. I'd been cropped out of the version they posted on the restaurant's Facebook page. My laptop chimed with an email from my business account. Vincent had found the MC Property Holdings website, the bare-bones professional site I'd paid $200 to have designed. His message was desperate and formal. Dear MC Property Holdings, we are the current tenants at 47 Hanover Street and would like to schedule a meeting to discuss our lease renewal. Rossetti's has been a valued member of this community for 18 years. 18 years. Dad had opened the restaurant when I was 16, and I'd been washing dishes there since I was 17. Vincent conveniently forgot to mention that in his family business narrative. I crafted my response carefully. Mr. Rossetti, thank you for reaching out. MC Property Holdings values maintaining positive relationships with existing tenants. However, we will need to discuss bringing your lease terms in line with current market rates. Are you available to meet Friday at 2 p.m.? Market rates. I wondered if they'd done the math yet, if they realized how much their cozy deal with Goldberg had been saving them. The old man had barely raised their rent in 5 years, probably too tired to deal with the hassle. I wasn't tired. I was motivated. Friday would be interesting. I'd booked a conference room at a business center downtown, neutral territory where Marcus the disappointing little brother could transform into Marcus the landlord who held their future in his hands. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Vincent, found their email. Meeting set for Friday. Pray these people are reasonable. Reasonable. That depended entirely on perspective. Friday arrived with an unseasonable February snowfall that had Vincent texting me at 7 a.m, roads are shit. Can you believe we might lose the restaurant because of some meeting in a blizzard? I'd been awake since 5 a.m. anyway, standing in front of my bathroom mirror practicing introductions. Good afternoon, I'm Marcus Caruso from MC Property Holdings. The words felt foreign and powerful at the same time. I'd chosen my best suit, the navy one I bought for Dad's retirement party, back when I thought I'd be celebrating instead of mourning. The conference room at the downtown business center cost me $75 for 2 hours, but it was worth it for the mahogany table and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Boston Harbor. I needed every psychological advantage I could get. At 1:45 p.m., I arranged my files with deliberate precision, market analysis reports, comparable rental rates, and a folder labeled 47, Hanover Street, current tenant that contained every detail about Rossetti's finances that had been public record. They were 12 minutes late. Through the glass door, I watched Vincent and Tony emerge from the elevator, both overdressed in suits they probably hadn't worn since Cousin Maria's wedding 3 years ago. Vincent was clutching a manila folder and muttering something to Tony, who kept checking his phone. They walked past the conference room twice, looking lost. These were men who commanded a kitchen with military precision but had never learned to navigate the world outside of marinara sauce and dinner rushes. For a moment, just a moment, I almost felt sorry for them. Tony finally approached the reception desk. We're looking for MC Property Holdings. We have a 2 p.m. meeting. The receptionist pointed toward my conference room. I watched Vincent straighten his tie and Tony run a hand through his thinning hair. They had no idea they were about to sit across from their own brother. When they walked through that door, I swear time stopped. Vincent saw me first. His face went through every emotion in the span of 3 seconds, confusion, recognition, and then something close to horror. What the fuck are you doing here? He blurted, then immediately looked embarrassed for cursing in what he clearly thought was someone else's business meeting. Tony was slower to process. He looked around the room as if Marcus the landlord might materialize from behind me. Wait, Marcus. Did MC Property Holdings hire you to translate or something? Because you know us. I let the silence stretch for exactly 10 seconds before responding. Gentlemen, please have a seat. I'm Marcus Caruso from MC Property Holdings. I believe we have a lease renewal to discuss. Vincent's folder hit the table with a slap. This is some kind of joke, right? You don't own our building. You can barely afford. He stopped mid-sentence, probably remembering that my financial situation wasn't actually any of his business anymore. I can barely afford what, Vincent? I kept my voice level, professional. Please, sit down. Tony remained standing, pointing an accusatory finger. How? How the hell do you own anything? You were washing dishes 8 months ago. I was head cook, actually. But you're right, Tony. 8 months ago, I was working for minimum wage while you and Vincent split profits from recipes I created. I opened the market analysis folder. Shall we discuss your lease terms? The look that passed between my brothers was the same one they'd shared countless times over the years, the silent communication that excluded me from every major decision. Except this time, I held all the cards. Vincent finally sat down heavily. Jesus Christ, Marcus. What do you want? What did I want? For 12 years, I'd wanted respect. Recognition. A fair share of something I'd helped build. Now I wanted something simpler and more complicated, justice. I want to discuss bringing your rent in line with current market rates, I said, sliding the comparable properties report across the table. Your current lease expires in 3 weeks. Tony's hand trembled as he picked up the market analysis. I watched his eyes scan the numbers, $7,200, $7,800, $8,100, comparable properties within 3 blocks of Rossetti's. His face went pale. These numbers are insane, he whispered. We can't afford this. The current market rate for your location is approximately $7,500 per month, I said, pulling out a calculator with deliberate slowness. Your existing lease at $4,200 has been significantly below market value. Vincent leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was a stranger. You've been planning this. How long, Marcus? How fucking long have you been planning this? Since the day Dad told me I wasn't management material, I replied. That would be September 18th, 2022. I remember the date because it was also the day I realized I'd wasted 12 years of my life believing family meant something. Tony was frantically scribbling numbers on the back of a receipt. Marcus, listen to me. We clear maybe $8,000 in profit on a good month. After payroll, supplies, utilities, if you raise our rent to $7,500, we'll be operating at a loss. Then perhaps you should have considered that before deciding I wasn't worthy of ownership. I opened my laptop and pulled up a spreadsheet. According to the financial records I've reviewed, Rossetti's averages $28,000 in monthly revenue. Your food costs run about 32%, labor costs approximately 35%. That leaves you with roughly $9,240 before rent and utilities. Vincent's jaw dropped. How do you know our exact numbers? Because for 12 years, I worked every position in that restaurant. I know exactly how many pounds of San Marzano tomatoes we go through in a week, how much we spend on Romano cheese, what our weekend wine sales look like. I closed the laptop. I know that business better than either of you ever will. Okay, fine. Tony slammed his palm on the table. You know the business. You want in. We can work something out. A partnership, maybe 20%. 20%. I laughed, and it came out harsher than I'd intended. You're offering me 20% of a business that exists at the pleasure of my property company? The conference room fell silent except for the heating system's gentle hum. Outside, snow continued to fall on the harbor, and I could see Vincent's reflection in the window. He looked older than his 37 years, tired in a way that had nothing to do with the early morning prep work. What's it going to take? Vincent asked quietly. What do you want from us, Marcus? For a moment, I saw my brother, not the man who'd excluded me from ownership, but the kid who taught me how to fold ravioli when I was 19. The same Vincent who'd covered for me when I accidentally broke Dad's favorite espresso cup, who'd split his employee meal with me during the early days when money was tight. But then I remembered last Christmas. The family dinner where they talked about the future of Rossetti's while I sat there like an outsider. How they discussed expanding to a second location, hiring a real marketing firm, maybe even franchising, all these dreams built on recipes I perfected, systems I developed, 12 years of my sweat and creativity. I want what you never gave me, I said finally. Respect. Tony was back to scribbling numbers. The most we could possibly afford is $5,500. And that's if we cut staff hours, stop the weekend specials, maybe eliminate the wine list to reduce inventory costs. Eliminate the wine list? I shook my head. That wine list generates 30% of your profit margin. Without it, you're just another pasta joint in the North End. Then what? Vincent exploded. What the hell do you expect us to do? We can't pay market rate and stay in business. You know that. You're basically asking us to choose between bankruptcy and bankruptcy. I pulled out the lease renewal document I prepared, all 43 pages of it. I'm prepared to offer you a 5-year lease at $6,000 per month, with annual increases of 3%. However, there are additional terms we need to discuss. Vincent grabbed the contract and started flipping through pages. Jesus Christ, Marcus. Tenant agrees to maintain property insurance of no less than $500,000. Landlord reserves the right to approve all exterior signage. Monthly financial reporting required. What is this, a hostile takeover? It's a professional lease agreement, I said. The kind you sign when you're serious about running a legitimate business. Monthly financial reporting. Tony looked up from his calculations. You want us to send you our books every month? I want transparency. Something that was never extended to me. The irony wasn't lost on any of us. For years, I'd asked to see the restaurant's financial statements, to understand the profit margins, to be included in business decisions. Tony and Vincent had always brushed me off with variations of, don't worry about it, or, we've got it handled. Now I could demand every receipt, every invoice, every deposit slip. This is revenge, Vincent said flatly. Pure and simple. I met his eyes across the mahogany table. No, Vincent. This is business. The silence stretched until Vincent finally spoke. 6,000 is still too much. We'd have to lay off Maria and probably cut back to 5 days a week. Maria. Our cousin who'd been working as a server for 3 years, sending half her paycheck back to her family in Sicily. The same Maria who'd always remembered my birthday when my own brothers forgot, who'd sneak me extra dessert during my breaks. That's a management decision, I said, but something cold twisted in my stomach. Tony leaned forward, desperation creeping into his voice. Marcus, you're talking about destroying something Dad spent 18 years building. Something our grandfather would have been proud of. Is that really what you want? Don't. I held up a hand. Don't you dare bring Nano into this. He's the one who taught me that family takes care of family. Remember that? La famiglia è tutto, he used to say. Family is everything, Vincent translated quietly. Exactly. So where was that philosophy when you two carved up the business like a Christmas turkey and left me with nothing? Vincent pushed the contract away. We offered you a job. Full-time, benefits. A job. I slammed my hand down, making both of them jump. I didn't want a job, Vincent. I wanted what I earned. What I deserved after 12 years of. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from an unknown number. Mr. Caruso, this is Jennifer Walsh from North End Properties. We represent a client interested in purchasing 47 Hanover Street. Are you open to offers? I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I'd only owned the building for 2 weeks, and already other investors were circling. The North End was prime real estate, gentrification was pushing rents higher every month. Who's texting you? Tony asked, trying to read my phone upside down. I flipped the phone face down. Business. But Vincent was sharp. Always had been. That face, that's your oh shit face. What's going on? I'd forgotten how well my brothers could read me, even after months of silence between us. It was the same expression I'd worn at 15 when I'd accidentally broken the front window with a baseball, or at 22 when I'd rear-ended someone in Dad's car. Nothing that concerns you, I said, but my voice lacked conviction. Tony stood up and started pacing behind his chair. This is insane. All of it. You buying the building, these lease terms, this whole revenge fantasy. What happens when Dad finds out? When he learns his sons are at war over a business he built with his bare hands? Dad. 73 years old, living in his condo in Medford, believing his 3 sons were successfully running the family legacy. The man who'd worked 16-hour days for 2 decades, who'd never taken a vacation, who'd literally bled into the marinara sauce the night he'd sliced his thumb on a can opener and kept cooking anyway. Maybe Dad should have thought about that before he cut me out, I said. He didn't cut you out. Vincent exploded. You were always part of the business. Just because you didn't get ownership. Didn't get ownership. I laughed bitterly. Vincent, I created half the menu. The carbonara that Food and Wine magazine called transcendent. That was my recipe. The Sunday sauce that has people waiting an hour for tables. I spent 2 years perfecting that blend. The wine pairings that doubled our beverage revenue. All me. My phone buzzed again. Another text, this time from a different number, saw your property purchase in the public records. Very interested in discussing a cash offer significantly above market value. The messages kept coming. Developers, investors, restaurant groups, somehow word was already spreading that 47 Hanover Street had new ownership. In Boston's red-hot real estate market, a prime North End location was like blood in the water. Tony noticed my distraction. Marcus, whatever's happening with that phone, we need to settle this first. Our lease expires in 18 days. We need time to figure out our finances, maybe get a loan. 18 days is plenty of time, I said, though my confidence was wavering. The text messages had shifted something in my chest, a growing realization of what I actually held in my hands. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about money. Serious money. My phone lit up with another notification. Then another. By the time Vincent finished reading through the lease terms, I had 7 messages from different real estate investors, all expressing interest in 47 Hanover Street. Cash offer $450,000, no inspection needed. Client looking for immediate closing, can go $475,000. Restaurant building North End, $500,000 sight unseen. $500,000. I bought the building for $340,000 just 2 weeks ago. These people were offering me a $160,000 profit for doing absolutely nothing except signing some papers. You look like you've seen a ghost, Tony said, settling back into his chair. Good news or bad news? Before I could answer, Vincent's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his face went white. It's Dad. We all stared at Vincent's phone like it was a bomb. Dad calling during business hours meant one of two things: either someone was dead, or someone had told him about the building sale. Vincent answered on the 4th ring. Hey, Dad. What's up? Even from across the table, I could hear Dad's voice through the speaker, not the words, but the tone. Rapid Italian mixed with English, the same cadence he used when vendors tried to overcharge him for produce or when a health inspector showed up unannounced. Vincent said, his eyes fixed on me. Yeah, Dad. Marcus is here with us right now, actually. More rapid-fire Italian. I caught a few words: edificio, building, affitto, rent, and what sounded like several creative curse words that Nana would have washed his mouth out for using. Dad wants to know if it's true, Vincent said, covering the phone. Mrs. Benedetto from the bakery next door told him some company bought Goldberg's building. He's asking if we know anything about it. Mrs. Benedetto. The 78-year-old gossip queen who knew every piece of North End business before it happened. Of course she'd noticed the change in ownership and gone straight to Dad with the news. Tony gestured frantically at me. Tell him we're handling it. Tell him it's fine. But Vincent was still staring at me, and I could see the exact moment he decided to blow everything up. Dad? Yeah, about that, you're going to want to sit down. Vincent, don't, I started. Marcus bought the building, Dad. Marcus owns our building now. The silence from the phone was deafening. Then, quietly, Dad's voice put me on speaker. Vincent placed the phone in the center of the conference table like it was evidence in a murder trial. Dad, you're on speaker. We're all here. Marcus. Dad's voice was carefully controlled, the same tone he'd used when I was 12 and he'd caught me stealing quarters from the register. Is this true? Yes, sir. You bought the building that houses my restaurant. Your former restaurant, I corrected. Tony and Vincent's restaurant now, according to you. Another silence. Then, we need to talk. All of us. Tonight. My place, 7 o'clock. Dad, we're in the middle of lease negotiations, Tony started. 7 o'clock, Dad repeated, and hung up. Vincent pocketed his phone and leaned back in his chair. Well, that went better than expected. My phone buzzed again. Another investor, this one offering $525,000. The numbers were escalating by the hour, and I was starting to understand why. A quick Google search revealed that 3 new luxury condos had been approved for construction within 2 blocks of the restaurant. The North End was about to get even more expensive, and my little building was sitting right in the middle of the development boom. We need to finish this conversation, I said, sliding my phone into my jacket pocket. Your lease expires in 18 days, and I have other interested parties. Other interested parties? Tony's voice cracked. What kind of other interested parties? I pulled out a clean sheet of paper and wrote $525,000 in large numbers, then slid it across the table. Vincent picked up the paper. What's this? The latest offer I've received for the building. Cash, no inspection, 30-day closing. Both of my brothers stared at the number like it was written in a foreign language. You're bluffing, Tony said finally. I pulled out my phone and showed them the text messages. Message after message, each offer higher than the last. By now, the bidding had reached $540,000. Jesus Christ, Vincent whispered. You could sell this place and make $200,000 profit, I finished. Maybe more, if I wait another week. The implications hung in the air between us. If I sold the building, Rossetti's would be finished. The new owners would either demolish it for condos or jack the rent up to $12,000 a month for some trendy fusion concept. 18 years of Dad's work. Gone. You wouldn't, Tony said, but uncertainty flickered in his eyes. Wouldn't I? I asked, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I honestly wasn't sure of the answer. The drive to Dad's house in Medford felt like a funeral procession. Vincent rode with Tony, and I followed in my Honda Civic, the same beat-up car I'd been driving since college because I'd never made enough at the restaurant to afford anything better. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now worth over $500,000 on paper, still driving a car with 180,000 miles and a check engine light that had been on for 2 years. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing. The latest offer was $575,000 from something called Beacon Hill Development Group. They'd included photos of their previous projects, sleek glass condos that sold for $800,000 each, trendy gastropubs with $18 cocktails and names like Harvest or The Local. By the time I pulled into Dad's driveway, the sun was setting behind the 3-family house he'd bought in 1987. The same house where we'd spent Sunday afternoons as kids, where Nana had taught us to make gnocchi by hand, where Dad had announced his retirement 8 months ago over leftover braccio and too much wine. I could see him through the kitchen window, standing at the same Formica counter that had been there since the Carter administration. His hair had gone completely gray in the months since retirement, and he'd lost weight, the kind of weight loss that happens when a man who's worked 16-hour days his entire life suddenly has nothing but time and worry. Tony and Vincent were already inside when I knocked. Dad opened the door wearing his reading glasses and a red sox sweatshirt that had seen better decades. He looked at me for a long moment before stepping aside. You want coffee? He asked, the same greeting he'd offered for 34 years. Sure, Dad. The kitchen smelled like garlic and Old Spice, exactly the way I remembered from childhood. Dad poured 4 cups of coffee from the same pot he'd been using since Mom died, strong enough to wake the dead, black as motor oil. He'd never learned to make it any other way. We sat around the kitchen table in silence until Dad finally spoke. So, my youngest son is now my other son's landlord. That's one way to put it, I said. $575,000, Vincent said quietly. That's what these developers are offering him, Dad. To tear down the restaurant and build condos. Dad's coffee cup stopped halfway to his lips. 500. And climbing, I added, pulling out my phone to show him the latest messages. I've gotten 12 offers since 3 o'clock. Dad studied the phone screen with the same intensity he used to reserve for invoice calculations. His hands shook slightly, not from age, but from something that looked like rage building behind his eyes. You know what I paid for that location in 2004, he asked finally. Tell me. $68,000. It was a dump, broken windows, water damage, hadn't been renovated since the 50s. I spent another $40,000 making it livable. Every weekend for 6 months, you boys helped me paint, install fixtures, sand floors. His voice grew quieter. Marcus, you were 14 years old, wearing those work gloves that were too big for your hands, helping me tile the kitchen. I remembered those weekends. How proud I'd felt when Dad trusted me to use the good tools, how he bought us all pizza afterward and talked about his dreams for the restaurant. How he promised that someday, all 3 of his sons would run the business together. That was a long time ago, Dad. Not that long. He set down his coffee cup with deliberate precision. Tell me exactly what you want, Marcus. No games, no negotiations. What will it take for you to sign a reasonable lease with your brothers? The question hung in the air like smoke. What did I want? 6 months ago, the answer had been simple: recognition, respect, a fair share of the business I'd helped build. But sitting in Dad's kitchen, watching Tony fidget with his wedding ring and Vincent stare at his hands, the answer felt more complicated. My phone buzzed again. $590,000. Dad noticed. Popular building. Getting more popular by the hour, I admitted. Marcus, Tony said suddenly, what if we gave you 30%? Equal partners, all 3 of us. Vincent shot him a look that could have curdled milk. Tony. No, listen. We split everything 3 ways. Profits, decisions, everything. You sign a 5-year lease at current rates, and we're partners. Dad nodded slowly. That sounds fair. Fair. Vincent exploded. He's extorting us. He's negotiating, Dad corrected. Something you 2 never bothered to do with him. My phone buzzed. $610,000. The number on my phone screen might as well have been written in neon. $610,000. I set the phone face down on Dad's kitchen table, but the damage was done, everyone had seen it. 600,000, Vincent repeated, his voice hollow. Jesus, Marcus. That's more than the restaurant makes in 2 years. Dad reached across the table and flipped my phone back over, studying the message from Beacon Hill Development Group. Says here they want to close in 2 weeks. Cash offer, no contingencies. Dad, don't encourage him, Tony said, but there was defeat in his voice. He's not actually going to sell the building out from under us. Right, Marcus? I looked at my brother, really looked at him. Tony had always been the responsible one, the guy who showed up early and stayed late, who remembered to order supplies and pay vendors on time. But he'd also been the one to tell me, 8 months ago, that business ownership requires a different skill set than what I possessed. 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't have considered it, I said carefully. But 2 weeks ago, these offers didn't exist. What's that supposed to mean? Vincent demanded. Before I could answer, my phone rang. Not a text this time, an actual call from a number I didn't recognize. Dad gestured for me to answer it. Marcus Caruso. Mr. Caruso, this is David Chen from Harbor Point Capital. We've been tracking the recent sale of your Hanover Street property, and we'd like to discuss an immediate cash offer of $650,000. I could hear every word in the dead silence of Dad's kitchen. My brother stared at me like I was speaking in tongues. I appreciate the call, Mr. Chen, but I'm not actively marketing the property. We understand, but our client is very motivated. We could have a signed purchase and sale agreement in your hands by Monday morning. Full cash, 15-day closing. $650,000. For a building I'd owned for exactly 16 days. I'll need to consider all options and get back to you, I said. Of course. But Mr. Caruso. This market moves fast. Properties in the North End don't stay available long. After I hung up, the kitchen stayed quiet except for the hum of Dad's ancient refrigerator. Finally, Vincent spoke up. You're seriously considering this? You're actually thinking about selling? I was. That was the hell of it, sitting there in Dad's kitchen, looking at my brother's panicked faces. I was genuinely considering taking the money and walking away. $650,000 would set me up for life. I could buy a house, start my own restaurant somewhere else, never have to think about Rossetti's family restaurant again. The 30% partnership, I said slowly. What would that actually look like? Tony leaned forward eagerly. Full profit sharing, equal say in all major decisions, your name on the business license. And what about the recipes? I interrupted. My carbonara, the Sunday sauce, the wine pairings that you've been using for 3 years. What about them? Vincent asked. Do I get credit? Recognition? Or do they stay family recipes that mysteriously appeared after Nano died? The silence stretched until Dad cleared his throat. Marcus has a point. That carbonara recipe has been in Food and Wine, The Globe, even that fancy cookbook about North End restaurants. Never once mentioned who created it. Because it's a family recipe, Vincent protested. We all contributed. Bullshit. The word came out harder than I'd intended. I spent 6 months perfecting that sauce. 6 months of buying ingredients with my own money, staying after hours to test variations. You two were barely speaking to me back then because I'd suggested we needed better financial tracking. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't another offer, it was a text from my cousin Maria at the restaurant. Marcus, customers asking about rumors the building sold. Should I be worried about my job? I showed the message to Dad. His face tightened as he read it. Maria's got 3 kids, he said quietly. She's the sole income since her husband got laid off from the dock. I know that, Dad. Do you? Because right now you're holding her future in your hands, along with everyone else who works there. 7 employees. Maria, plus 2 other servers, the dishwasher, the prep cook, and the weekend bartender. People who had nothing to do with the family politics but would lose everything if I sold to developers. Tony must have seen something shift in my expression. The partnership offer stands, Marcus. 30%, full recognition, everything equal from now on. 40%, I said. What? 40%. I want 40%, Vincent gets 35, Tony gets 25. Why do I get the smallest share? Tony asked. Because you're the one who told Dad I wasn't management material. Dad drummed his fingers on the table, the same rhythm he'd used when calculating tips at the end of long Saturday nights. 40% seems fair, considering Marcus now owns the building the business sits in. My phone rang again. Another developer, another offer. This time I didn't answer. But Vincent wasn't backing down. 40%. For what? You haven't worked there in 8 months. You don't know our current suppliers, our new systems, the changes we've made. What changes? I asked, genuinely curious. Vincent and Tony exchanged a look. We expanded the wine list, Tony said defensively. Added a Thursday night special. Updated the POS system. You expanded my wine list using my supplier contacts, I corrected. And what's the Thursday special? Osso buco, Vincent mumbled. With saffron risotto? Yeah. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's my recipe too. The one I made for Dad's 68th birthday. You told me it was too expensive for the regular menu. Dad looked between his sons with growing irritation. Let me understand this. You boys have been using Marcus's recipes, his supplier relationships, his wine knowledge, but somehow he's not qualified for ownership. Dad, it's not that simple, Tony started. It sounds pretty simple to me. Dad stood up and refilled his coffee cup, a sure sign he was about to deliver one of his lectures. Marcus, show me the lease terms you offered them. I pulled out the contract, watching Vincent flinch as Dad flipped through the pages. His reading glasses slipped down his nose as he scanned the fine print, occasionally muttering in Italian. Monthly financial reporting, he read aloud. Property insurance minimums. Right of approval for exterior changes. He looked up at Tony and Vincent. These are standard commercial lease terms. What exactly is unreasonable here? The rent, Dad, Tony said. $6,000 a month is 50% more than we were paying Goldberg. And still 20% below market rate, I added, pulling out my phone to show him comparable properties. Giuseppe's down the street pays $8,500. Nana's kitchen on Salem Street pays $9,000. Dad studied the numbers, then looked at his older sons. So Marcus is offering you below market rent, standard lease terms, and you're complaining because? Because he's our brother. Vincent exploded. This whole thing is insane. Families don't operate like this. No, Dad said quietly. Families include each other in major decisions. Families don't exclude people who've dedicated their lives to the business. He closed the lease contract and slid it toward Vincent. Sign it. Dad. Sign the lease, Vincent. $6,000 a month for 5 years, with the partnership terms Marcus outlined. 40-35-25 split. My phone buzzed with yet another offer. $675,000 from something called Metropolitan Development Partners. Dad noticed me glance at it. How high are these offers going to go, he asked. I honestly don't know. The real estate agent I talked to yesterday thinks the building could hit $750 if there's a bidding war. $750,000. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Vincent was doing math on a napkin, probably calculating how many years of restaurant profits that represented. Marcus, Dad said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I want an honest answer. Okay. Are you doing this for the right reasons? The partnership, keeping the family business alive? Or are you doing it because you're angry and you want to hurt your brothers? I stared at the coffee cup in my hands, the same mismatched set Dad had been using since I was a kid. Some were chipped, some were stained, but he refused to throw any of them away because they still hold coffee just fine. Both, I admitted finally. I want the partnership because I earned it. But yeah, part of me wants them to understand what it feels like to have your future decided by someone else. Dad nodded like that was the answer he'd expected. At least you're honest. Vincent crumpled up his napkin full of calculations and threw it across Dad's kitchen. You know what? Fine. Fine. 40% it is. But I want something in writing that says if you ever sell this building, we get first right of refusal at your original purchase price. I almost choked on my coffee. My original purchase price? Vincent, I paid $340 for a building that's now worth $675. You want me to give up $300,000 in equity? You want us to give up the restaurant Dad built with his bare hands, Tony shot back. Seems like a fair trade. My phone was lighting up again, 2 more calls I didn't answer and a text from someone called North Shore Capital Group offering $695,000. The feeding frenzy was getting ridiculous. Dad held up his hand for silence. What if we split the difference? Marcus, if you ever sell, your brothers get first right of refusal at the midpoint between your purchase price and fair market value at time of sale. So if it's worth $700,000 when I want to sell, they can buy it for. I did quick math in my head. $520. Exactly. Vincent was already shaking his head. Dad, we can't afford $520 any more than we can afford $700. We're a pasta restaurant, not Goldman Sachs. Then maybe you'll be motivated to make the business profitable enough to secure financing, Dad said dryly. Before anyone could respond, Tony's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and his face went white. It's Detective Morrison. We all knew Detective Morrison. He'd been investigating the break-ins that had plagued North End restaurants over the past 3 months. Giuseppe's had been hit twice, Nana's kitchen once, and there'd been rumors that the thieves were specifically targeting family-owned places with older security systems. Tony answered on speaker. Detective Morrison, what's going on? Tony, I'm at your restaurant right now. Looks like you guys got hit tonight. Front door lock was jimmied, register's been cleaned out, and they made a mess of your office upstairs. You need to get down here ASAP. The blood drained from Vincent's face. How much did they get? Hard to say until you can tell me what's missing. But the register was open and empty, and your office safe is standing wide open. The safe. I knew that safe. It was where Dad had always kept the weekend receipts, the emergency cash, and the envelope of tip money for staff. If it was a good weekend, there could be $3,000 or $4,000 in there. We'll be right there, Tony said, but he was looking at me. All of us. 20 minutes later, we were standing in the restaurant I'd worked in for 12 years, watching crime scene text dust for fingerprints on the espresso machine. The place looked like a tornado had hit it, chairs overturned, tablecloths pulled off tables, the framed photo of Nano smashed on the floor. Detective Morrison approached us with his notebook. They were looking for something specific. This wasn't random vandalism. They knew exactly where your safe was, knew about the register, even found that lockbox you keep under the bar. The lockbox. Vincent looked confused. What lockbox under the bar? Morrison pointed toward the bar area, where a small metal box sat open and empty. Hidden behind the bottles of Sambuca. Had about $800 in cash and some jewelry. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. What kind of jewelry? Wedding ring, looked like. Gold chain. Some earrings. Mom's jewelry. Dad had given it to the restaurant years ago, kept it in that hidden lockbox as emergency money, said Mom would have wanted it to help keep the family business alive if times ever got really tough. Dad was staring at the empty lockbox with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not sadness, something closer to defeat. They knew about Mom's ring, he said quietly. Whoever did this knew exactly where we kept everything. The implication hit all of us at the same time. This wasn't some random break-in. Someone with inside knowledge had robbed Rossetti's family restaurant. Someone who knew every hiding place, every security weakness, every detail of how we operated. Detective Morrison was watching our faces carefully. Gentlemen, I need to ask, who has keys to this place? Detective Morrison's question hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. Who has keys to this place? Just us, Vincent said quickly. Me, Tony, Dad, and... He stopped, his eyes finding mine across the wreckage. Marcus. Marcus, Morrison repeated, flipping to a fresh page in his notebook. You're the third son. Former employee, Tony corrected, and I felt that familiar sting of exclusion even in the middle of a crime scene. But you still have keys? Morrison asked me directly. I pulled out my keychain, feeling 3 sets of family eyes burning into me. The brass key to Rossetti's front door sat next to my apartment key, worn smooth from 12 years of opening and closing. I'd never bothered returning it after they pushed me out. When's the last time you were in the restaurant? Morrison continued. 8 months ago. The day I stopped working here. And today. Where were you between 5 and 8 p.m.? Vincent stepped forward. He was with us. At our dad's house in Medford. All 4 of us were there from 7 until we got your call. Morrison nodded, making notes. What about other employees? Cleaning crew? Vendors? Maria has a key, Tony said. She opens on Sundays when we're closed for family dinner prep. And Giuseppe the produce guy has one for early morning deliveries. Giuseppe Torino. Morrison looked up sharply. Tall guy, drives the white delivery truck. Yeah, that's him. Why? He's been questioned in connection with 2 other break-ins. Same MO, knew exactly where the cash was kept, when the restaurants would be empty. Morrison closed his notebook. I'm going to need contact information for all your key holders and employees. As Tony rattled off phone numbers, I found myself staring at the destroyed office upstairs. Papers scattered everywhere, filing cabinets dumped out, but something felt wrong. The chaos looked too deliberate, too thorough for a simple cash grab. Detective, I called out, can I look at something? Morrison followed me upstairs to the office, stepping carefully around scattered invoices and order forms. I went straight to the filing cabinet where Dad had always kept the important documents, lease agreements, insurance policies, tax records. The hanging folders were all there, but they'd been rifled through with surgical precision. Every single business document had been pulled out and examined. This doesn't make sense, I said, holding up a stack of invoices. Why would thieves care about our supplier contracts? Morrison crouched down next to me, studying the mess. What are you thinking? Someone was looking for financial information. Bank statements, profit reports, lease documents. I picked up a crumpled paper from the floor, our quarterly tax filing from last year. This isn't about $800 in cash. Someone wanted to know how much money this business really makes. Or how much it's worth, Morrison said quietly. The implication sent ice through my veins. Someone had broken into Rossetti's looking for information about the restaurant's finances, just hours after I'd been fielding offers from developers all over Boston. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Another text, this one from a number I recognized, David Chen from Harbor Point Capital, the guy who'd called during dinner at Dad's house. Mr. Caruso, heard about the incident at the restaurant tonight. Hope everyone's okay. Our offer still stands if circumstances have changed your mind about selling. I stared at the message, my blood pressure spiking. Detective Morrison. You need to see this. He read the text over my shoulder, his expression darkening. How did he know about the break-in? We haven't released anything to the media. From downstairs, I heard Dad's voice rising in anger. Vincent, check the walk-in cooler. Make sure they didn't contaminate anything. But I was focused on my phone, scrolling back through the dozens of offers I'd received since this afternoon. Harbor Point Capital, Beacon Hill Development, Metropolitan Development Partners, all of them had contacted me within hours of each other, all with escalating offers, all with intimate knowledge of the North End real estate market. Detective, I said slowly, what if this break-in wasn't about robbing the restaurant? What if someone was gathering financial information to pressure me into selling the building? Morrison's pen stopped moving. You own this building? As of 2 weeks ago. And I've been getting cash offers all day, each one higher than the last. How much higher? I showed him the progression of texts. $450,000 at 2 p.m., escalating to $695,000 by dinner time. Then David Chen's message about the break-in, sent at 9:47 p.m., less than 2 hours after Detective Morrison had called Tony. Someone's been watching this place, Morrison said. And watching you. Downstairs, Vincent was arguing with someone from the insurance company over the phone while Tony swept glass from the broken picture frame. Dad stood in the middle of it all looking older than his 73 years, holding Mom's empty jewelry box like it might bring her back. My phone rang. David Chen again. This time, I answered. Mr. Chen, interesting timing for your call. Mr. Caruso, I understand you've had a difficult evening. Sometimes these unfortunate incidents help clarify what's really important: family safety, financial security, peace of mind. The words sounded like a threat wrapped in sympathy. Are you suggesting the break-in and your interest in my building are connected? I'm simply saying that restaurant ownership comes with inherent risks that property investment doesn't. Our offer of $650 stands, and we can close by Friday if you're ready to move on from the restaurant business. I looked around the destroyed dining room, at my brothers cleaning up glass and my father holding the remnants of our mother's memory. I'll call you back, I said, and hung up before he could respond. But even as I said it, I knew I wouldn't be calling David Chen back. I'd be calling Detective Morrison. 3 days after the break-in, I was sitting in Detective Morrison's office at District 1, staring at a corkboard covered with photos, phone records, and a map of the North End with red pins marking every restaurant that had been robbed in the past 6 months. Giuseppe Torino, Morrison said, tapping a surveillance photo of our produce supplier. Turns out he's been feeding information to a network of developers and investment groups. They target family restaurants in gentrifying neighborhoods, gather financial intelligence, then apply pressure through various means. Various means, I repeated. You mean break-ins? Among other things. Health department complaints, fire safety violations, zoning issues. Anything to make the business owners desperate enough to sell. Morrison pulled out a thick file. Harbor Point Capital has been linked to similar schemes in Cambridge and Somerville. They create artificial urgency, make it seem like selling is the only option. My phone had been quiet since I'd stopped answering the developer calls, but the messages kept coming. David Chen's latest text, sent at 6:23 a.m., was particularly direct. Property values in transitional neighborhoods can be volatile. Best to secure a guaranteed sale price before market conditions change. So what happens now? I asked. Giuseppe's cooperating with our investigation in exchange for reduced charges. The developers will be harder to prosecute, they're careful to keep their hands technically clean. Morrison leaned back in his chair. But here's what interests me, Marcus. You're in a unique position here. How do you mean? You own exactly what they want, but you also have family ties to the business they're trying to destroy. That puts you right in the middle of their operation. He tapped the corkboard again. We could use that. 20 minutes later, I was walking back toward Hanover Street with Morrison's business card in my pocket and a wire taped to my chest. The plan was simple: answer David Chen's next call, arrange a meeting, and record whatever pressure tactics Harbor Point Capital used to force property sales. The restaurant looked different in daylight. Vincent had replaced the broken window, and Maria was setting up tables for the lunch crowd like nothing had happened. But I could see the new security cameras mounted in every corner, and the way Tony kept glancing toward the door every time someone walked past. Marcus. Maria spotted me through the window and waved me inside. Thank God you're here. These two idiots have been driving me crazy all morning. Vincent looked up from the reservation book, his expression wary. Thought you were meeting with the detective. Just finished. Giuseppe's been arrested. I watched both brothers' faces as the news sank in. Turns out he's been working with the developers who want to buy the building. Giuseppe. Tony dropped the wine glass he'd been polishing. But he's been our supplier for 8 years. His family knows our family. Apparently his family needed money more than they needed loyalty. I pulled out a chair at table 12, the same table where I'd eaten staff meals for over a decade. The detective thinks there are more businesses targeted. Places where the owners might be vulnerable to pressure. Vincent sat down across from me, his anger from 3 days ago replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. So what does this mean for us? For the partnership deal? Before I could answer, my phone rang. David Chen, right on schedule. I gestured for my brothers to stay quiet, then answered. Mr. Chen. Marcus, I hope you're reconsidering our conversation. I've been hearing troubling rumors about ongoing security issues in your area. The wire under my shirt felt warm against my skin. What kind of security issues? Restaurant businesses are particularly vulnerable, as you've recently experienced. Our clients prefer to avoid properties with those complications. His voice carried that same artificial sympathy from 3 nights ago. Perhaps it's time to consider a clean exit before things become more complicated. I looked at Vincent and Tony, both hanging on every word. Through the kitchen doorway, I could see Dad arranging ingredients for the lunch prep, his hands moving with the muscle memory of 50 years in restaurant kitchens. Mr. Chen, I said slowly, I think you and I should meet in person to discuss this. The meeting with David Chen was set for 2 p.m. at a coffee shop on Commercial Street, 2 blocks from the restaurant. I arrived 15 minutes early, the wire heavy against my chest, and chose a corner table where Detective Morrison's surveillance team could get clear audio from their van across the street. Chen walked in at exactly 2 p.m., tall, expensive suit, the kind of confident smile that real estate developers wore when they smelled blood in the water. He ordered a double espresso and sat down like we were old friends. Marcus, you look tired. This whole situation with your family business must be incredibly stressful. It's been an interesting week, I said, keeping my voice neutral. He pulled out a tablet and swiped to a document that made my stomach clench. I took the liberty of having my team research the restaurant's financials. Public records, health department reports, tax assessments. Very illuminating. The screen showed a detailed breakdown of Rossetti's revenue, expenses, and profit margins going back 3 years. Numbers that should have been private, information that could only have come from someone with access to our books. Where did you get this? I asked. Restaurant businesses generate a surprising amount of public data. Liquor license renewals, workers' compensation filings, health inspections. He swiped to another page. For instance, did you know your family restaurant failed its last health inspection? Refrigeration issues, improper food storage temperatures. That was impossible. Vincent ran the tightest kitchen in the North End. He was obsessive about food safety, had been since a bout of food poisoning at a competitor's restaurant made headlines 5 years ago. When was this inspection? Chen smiled. Yesterday morning. Inspector Ronald Walsh noted several critical violations. Strange timing, don't you think? Right after the break-in, new security concerns, and now health code problems. The wire under my shirt felt like it was burning. This wasn't just about gathering intelligence anymore, they were actively sabotaging the restaurant to force my hand. Here's what I'm prepared to offer, Chen continued, sliding a contract across the table. 700,000 cash, 10-day closing, and we'll make sure the health department issues get resolved quietly. Your family can find a new location, start fresh somewhere the operating environment is more stable. 700,000. The number I've been chasing in my head for days, now sitting in black and white with David Chen's signature already on the bottom. My phone buzzed with a text from Vincent, health inspector here again. Says we have 48 hours to fix violations or they're shutting us down. What violations? Kitchen is spotless. I showed Chen the message. Interesting coincidence. Not a coincidence, Marcus. A reality. Restaurant businesses face constant regulatory challenges. Property investment is much simpler. He tapped the contract. This offer expires at 5 p.m. today. After that, my clients will pursue other opportunities in the neighborhood. Other opportunities. I thought about Giuseppe's route, a dozen family restaurants he supplied, each one vulnerable to the same tactics they'd used on us. What if I'm not ready to sell? I asked. Chen's smile never wavered, but something cold flickered behind his eyes. Then I hope your family has excellent insurance coverage. Restaurants face so many risks, kitchen fires, slip and fall accidents, food poisoning lawsuits. The liability exposure alone could bankrupt a small operation. That was it. The threat Morrison had been waiting for, recorded clearly on the wire that would help shut down their entire operation. I stood up, leaving the contract and signed on the table. Mr. Chen, I think I'll take my chances with the restaurant business. His smile finally cracked. You're making a mistake, Marcus. A very expensive mistake. Walking back toward Hanover Street, I could see Detective Morrison's been following at a distance. My phone was already buzzing with a call from Vincent, probably panicking about the health inspection. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I belonged. By 4:30 p.m., I was back at the restaurant watching Vincent scrub down surfaces that were already spotless while a health inspector with dead eyes and a clipboard made notes about imaginary violations. Inspector Ronald Walsh, the same name David Chen had mentioned during our coffee meeting. Sir, I'm telling you, that thermometer is reading correctly, Vincent said, his voice strained with barely controlled frustration. Our walk-in has been at 36 degrees all week. Walsh tapped his pen against the clipboard. My equipment shows 42 degrees. That's 6 degrees above safe storage temperature for dairy products. He pointed toward our cheese station. I'm recommending immediate closure until the refrigeration system can be professionally serviced and re-inspected. I stepped forward, the wire still taped under my shirt making me hyper-aware of every word. Inspector Walsh, could you show me exactly which thermometer you're using? He held up a digital device that looked newer than anything we owned. State-certified equipment, calibrated this morning. Mind if I test it against our backup thermometer? I asked, pulling out the handheld unit we kept for double-checking temperatures. Walsh's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That won't be necessary. My equipment is accurate. But Vincent was already moving, grabbing our thermometer and sticking it into the same location Walsh had tested. 36 degrees, exactly where it should be. He held it up for Walsh to see. Interesting discrepancy, I said, loud enough for the wire to pick up clearly. Inspector Walsh, have you had any contact with Harbor Point Capital or Beacon Hill Development Group? The color drained from Walsh's face. I don't know what you're implying, but... I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. I pulled out my phone and opened David Chen's contract, still displayed on the screen. Because it's interesting that you mentioned the exact same refrigeration issues that a developer brought up to me 2 hours ago. Walsh snapped his clipboard shut. This inspection is complete. You have 48 hours to address the violations before I recommend closure to the department. He practically ran out the front door, leaving behind a restaurant full of confused staff and 2 brothers staring at me like I'd grown a second head. Marcus, Tony said slowly, what the hell just happened? Before I could answer, my phone rang. Detective Morrison. We got it all, he said without preamble. The threats, the coordination with the inspector, everything. Walsh just called Chen from his car. We've been monitoring both their phones since yesterday. Through the restaurant window, I could see Inspector Walsh sitting in his city vehicle, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing frantically with his free hand. What's our next move? I asked. Chen's people are going to realize their inspector got burned. They'll either back off completely or escalate fast, probably try to close the deal before 5 p.m. like they threatened. I looked at Dad, who was standing behind the bar holding Mom's empty jewelry box, and at Vincent, who was still clutching the thermometer like it might provide answers to questions he didn't know how to ask. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Building fire on Hanover Street can spread quickly in winter weather. Hope your insurance premiums are current. The message sent ice through my veins. I showed it to Morrison over the phone. That's it, he said. We're moving now. Get your family out of that building immediately. But even as I started shouting for everyone to evacuate, I could already smell something that shouldn't be there. Smoke. The smoke was coming from the basement, thick, acrid clouds that meant electrical fire, not kitchen grease. I grabbed the fire extinguisher from behind the bar while shouting for everyone to get out, but Dad was already moving toward the basement stairs. Dad, no. I caught his arm. The fire department's coming. 18 years, he said, his voice breaking. 18 years I built this place. Through the smoke, I could see Vincent helping Maria gather her purse and tips while Tony called 911. The smell was getting stronger, that chemical burn of melting wires and insulation that meant the building's electrical system was going up in flames. My phone rang. David Chen. Marcus, I'm hearing sirens in your neighborhood. I hope everyone's safe. His voice carried that same artificial concern. Funny how quickly these old buildings can become liability nightmares. The wire under my shirt was still recording. Detective Morrison had said to keep them talking, get them on record making explicit threats. Did you do this? I asked directly. I'm simply a real estate investor, Marcus. I don't control aging electrical systems or faulty wiring. A pause. But I can control my offer. 600,000, final number, cash in your account by tomorrow if you sign tonight. 600,000. 200,000 less than his offer 6 hours ago, but still more money than I'd ever dreamed of having. Through the smoke and chaos, I watched my family evacuating the restaurant that had been our life for nearly 2 decades. You want to know something, Chen? I said, watching the fire trucks turn onto Hanover Street. You made one critical mistake in all this. What's that? You assumed I was doing this for the money. I hung up on him and walked outside where my brothers were standing on the sidewalk, watching smoke pour out of our basement windows. The fire chief emerged 20 minutes later with news that made my chest tight, electrical fire in the basement, but we caught it early. Looks like someone tampered with your main electrical panel, probably happened within the last few hours. Detective Morrison arrived as the last fire truck was leaving. Chen's been arrested, along with Inspector Walsh and 2 others. We've got recorded evidence of conspiracy, extortion, and now arson. Vincent grabbed my arm. Marcus, the building. How bad is the damage? The fire chief overheard. Basement needs complete electrical rewiring, some water damage on the first floor. You're looking at maybe 70,000 in repairs. Building structurally sound, though. $70,000. I had that much in my savings account, the money I'd scraped together working 2 jobs while my brothers split restaurant profits they thought I didn't deserve. My phone buzzed with one final text from an unknown number, cash offer $750,000, immediate closing, no inspection needed. I deleted it without reading the sender's name. Vincent, Tony, I said, pulling out the partnership agreement Dad had witnessed 3 nights ago. 40-35-25 split, remember? You're still willing to do this? Tony asked. After everything? I looked at the restaurant, smoke-stained windows, water pooling under the front door, 18 years of family history temporarily displaced but not destroyed. We're going to rebuild this place, I said. All of us. Equal partners. Dad stepped forward and put his arms around all 3 of his sons. Your mother would be proud. 6 months later, I was standing behind the bar at Rossetti's family restaurant, watching Vincent plate my carbonara recipe while Tony handled a dinner reservation for the food critic from the Boston Globe. The new electrical system hummed quietly in the basement, and Mom's jewelry, recovered during Chen's arrest, sparkled in its place of honor above the espresso machine. The brass nameplate next to the register read, Rossetti Family Restaurant, owned and operated by Vincent, Tony, and Marcus Caruso. Finally, I belonged.